It's a beautiful thing. And we're live.
And we are live. Great. So today we're going to start talking about reframing your story. And thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking the time to watch this. But we are going to really blow your mind. We're going to unlock your potential. And for some people, this is a huge dramatic difference. And for some people, it does take a little time. Welcome, Lourdes. How are you today?
Terrific. How are you?
I'm great. So, as we stated in the introduction, we're going to talk about reframing your stories. And what we were saying in the pre-chat, one of the reasons that I wanted to talk about reframing the stories that we have is because with our perceptions, we create our realities. We create the outcomes or results that we are having. It's based on how we see things. And how we see things are the genesis of how we see things are our experiences and the story and meaning that we give them. And so one thing that I think that we always look at is how as children, we have all of these stories, and these stories carry us unless we look at them. They carry through the rest of our lives and they limit us. And so what happens is that we live an unfulfilled life sometimes. We live in emotions that don't serve us at all times. And I'm speaking about, people that suffer from mild depression, anxiety, anger, and guilt and shame. And a way to start relieving that is taking a look at what is the genesis of this emotion. When did I first start feeling it? And I think that by giving people just a couple of ideas of how to reframe these stories can really have a dramatic shift, because it'll create a subconscious or an emergence of your subconscious to shift. And again, everything starts in your subconscious mind. If your subconscious mind thinks, hey, I should weigh X amount, you're going to weigh X amount. You're going to weigh X amount because your subconscious is the core that drives everything.
And so from my perspective, I love everything that you just said. And in working with clients, this is often a good deal of our work. It's the messages that they have received as children from parents, likely, or in schools, adults, their social, their community. And I'm going to go, I want to interject for anyone listening to hear that it's so important to be mindful about your words, because you don't know how heavy a burden you're laying on someone else with your words and your remarks. And it's important to be really mindful so that your words don't damage other people. But coming back to client work, something happens in childhood and we build stories from that and we give it meaning. And then we that becomes our identity. And yes, this graphic is perfect for that, because we have an experience, we create a story, it becomes our identity, and then it drives behavior, which obviously affects the outcome. I'm going to let you do the reverse side of that. But what I want to add is that looking at these experiences and being able to reframe the story is a key component of the work that I do with clients. And it's something that I think most people would benefit from doing, attempting it on your own even, or working with someone. It's these beliefs that we have about ourselves and our stories really need to be looked at and really need to be mined for, where did that come from? And is this really true? And just asking powerful questions to unpack that and unravel it so that it's no longer driving your behavior and your outcomes.
I totally agree. I love what you said. And I'm glad that you interjected the point that we really need to be mindful of what we say and how, we sling, arrows, daggers at people with our words without even knowing. And then unfortunately, hurt people. And at that moment, they don't care how many, slaying words they say to you. They are in such a state. And if we practice mindfulness, definitely we just need that 2 seconds to say, I'm not at my best right now. Give me 5 minutes, I'll be back. And I realize that's, for some people, that's not an option to say, give me 5 minutes. But I love that you interjected that, for definitely. But going back to the actual reframing, one of the things that with the subconscious mind, which is really where we focus on, is that if your subconscious mind wants you to do something, it will do something. And so you want to, start the new year and you want to lose weight or you want to work out or whatever. But if your subconscious story is, and you're unaware of it, is, if I'm at this weight, I'm protected. If I drink, then I don't have to participate. Whatever it is that you're doing as an avoidance mechanism, as a coping mechanism, then until you say, what am I trying to avoid? Then your subconscious mind is going to just keep avoiding it, allowing you to avoid it because you don't want to face it. And one thing that I love about the subconscious mind is that it doesn't know what reality really is. So there have been many experiments. If you close your eyes and you imagine something, the lemon test, right? If you imagine that, if you close your eyes and you imagine that you're sucking on a lemon, your mouth will begin to water. I mean, it's a natural occurrence. There is no lemon. And so when you reframe your story, what I love is that it gives you space and allows the subconscious mind to start going, oh, there are options, there are alternatives. Because when you stick to one story, then there are no options, there are no choices, you have no control, and you're very limited. And so going back to this picture, what we're doing is, okay, so your story began with an experience, right? And I was speaking to someone the other day how their father was very volatile. And I mentioned, hey, sometimes, a lot of times, my dad would come home and he would be in a horrible mood. And as one of the younger children, I'd hide. And so I look at that story and I look at her story and I go, okay, so what happened. We're not going to change the past. And I think that's something, that's another conversation where people are revisiting the past, thinking that somehow it's going to change by revisiting it. But the only way that you can change the past is emotionally. And so you can shift, but you have to be willing to shift the story emotionally. And so what I started to think of was, in most cases, my story would be, hey, I wish my dad had been different. I wish he had been kinder. I wish he this or that, And, my dad was a great supporter. And my dad did many great things, not just for me, but for other families, and helped. But the truth is that as a child, I don't see all of that stuff, because as a child, I don't care about all that stuff. But what I realized is that at a level, I'm still immature, because I'm still 5 wishing my dad is different, instead of thinking, wow, what happened to him? Why don't I wish he had a better experience, right? And so just by thinking, wow, if he had had a better experience, if he had been embraced differently, if he had maybe tools to handle the stressors that he was under, and he was under tremendous stress, an immigrant, didn't speak the language, had to learn the language, pretty quick. And so how about if I had thought, if I started to think, oh, I wish his experience was different. What would have happened if he had learned English earlier? Or what if he had had his mother? What if, things had been different for him? Things would have been different for me, but I don't know if they would have been much better. Just that space gives me the breath to understand that this story is just a story, right? That even though things don't become different, my understanding unfolds. And I think, wow, his life could have been different,
Yeah.
and I think, oh, okay, so I let go of the, oh, poor me, and I level up and I think, oh, it's not just about me. And just knowing that it's just not about me reframes my story, because now I see things differently. And just shifting that perspective releases you from that box of that story. That story has now changed emotionally. And when you change that story emotionally, I think it's impactful for you.
Right, because you're on some level, you're letting go of some of the hurt and some of the resentment. And coming back to something that you said in terms of what he was unable to give was just a byproduct of the fact that he did not receive those things. So how could he possibly give them? He didn't know better, so he certainly couldn't do better. And that's the one of the things that in working with clients, obviously my clients are adults, so they have usually their parents are either older or they have passed away. But coming to the realization that we're all just flawed human beings. There is no perfection. No one is going to be the perfect parent. And just because you had an experience when maybe your mom or your dad was going through a very difficult time, or they were having a bad day, and maybe they were short with you, or maybe they responded harshly, or maybe they were not their best selves. And then you had a negative interaction with them, you gave it meaning, it impacted how you see yourself in terms of worthiness and value and lovability. And, sometimes creating a belief of not being enough from this story, from this experience, when really it was that, your parent was having a bad day and had a negative ripple effect in their home with their family and their kids. And now you've been burdened with it as a child, and you grow up with this negative story and perception of yourself, when if you were looking at it, as like a movie of your childhood, and you could see what was happening in your mom or dad's day that day, or in their life, their own experiences, and how that was just a little moment of a reaction from them that, you ran with, basically. You gave it all of this meaning and all of this impact on your own life. But seeing the movie of what was actually happening in your parents' life would be like, oh, wow, I get it. Oh, they
Right.
were having such a hard time. It was that, it was grueling for them. And, and that's not what they meant at all. It was just,
Right.
a split second of a reaction, that them being reactive. And so it's being able to see that, unpack that, and reframe, these beliefs that have created, identity in so
Right.
many ways.
And I want to, what you said was perfect. And I just want to add that these things that we're talking about, reframing your story, that doesn't mean that you were wrong in how you interpreted the event. Remember, you are a child. You have limited resources. We have our defense mechanisms, our coping mechanisms, and our adaptive mechanisms to survive growing up. It is our job to reparent ourselves and look and say, hey, I don't feel like I'm thriving, or I feel these constraints, the depression, the insecurity, the shame, the not good enough. And we have to look at what's the genesis of this emotion. Why am I feeling this? And you'll see that it's not true. You are good enough. But only you can look back and reframe that story and say, hey, wait a second. I thought I was not good enough because my parents didn't spend a lot of time with me. No, that's not actually what happened. And if you're fortunate enough to have older siblings, they'll tell you, hey, you know what? They were working extra shifts, or, she was taking care of your grandmother, her mother, or she was needed somewhere else. She would have loved to be with you. She didn't have her resources. I mean, there's like so many different reasons why parents don't show up for us, but we only have one. But we only have one because, we're kids, we're child, we're children. And so I just invite people to say, hey, look, you're not wrong. This isn't about right or wrong. This is about looking at what else was happening from your adult eyes instead of just your children eyes.
Right. And expanding the conversation a little bit. I mean, we've been focused on parents and family dynamics, but also like within schools, sometimes girls get the message that girls are not good in math. I mean, that message is still happening in some environments, right?
Yes.
Or being labeled in certain ways, and kids then carry that detriment of, oh, you're not creative, or oh, you wouldn't be a good dancer, or no, you don't, you can't, you're not a good writer, that
Right.
kind of thing. And then it's like one person's perspective changes that individual's trajectory, because now they don't have the belief that they can do that thing.
Right. Right.
When in reality, that was one person's opinion, their assessment, and maybe there is quite a bit of room for improvement, but it's not a reason to give up if this is something that you're passionate about, right?
Right. Absolutely. Well, thank you. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think that just to bring this to a close, I would tell people to start journaling. Start with on a scale of 1 to 10, start with a memory that's maybe a 3 or a 4 as you begin to journal. If you haven't journaled in the past, if you're not working with anyone, and take a look at what the circumstance was and say, you know what, as an adult, why would my parent have done this? Or why would the teacher have done this? Or how is this really true? And figure out where you can interject something that shifts the story, because it's that little space that's going to give you the breath that you need to expand out of the box that you're in.
Perfectly said.
Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure being with you again today. And on Thursday, we'll be answering some more of those questions that we were not able to get to last week.
Sounds
All right.
good.
Signing off then.